Good afternoon. Thank you very much for watching Holistic Pet Care with Dr. O and Sylvia Global Media Network. We are so fortunate today to once again have Dr. Jean Dodds joining us from HemoPet from California to share some more of her amazing information and everything else that goes along with Dr. Dodds. Today, we're going to talk about nutrigenomics, and this excitement that you see on my face, although it might have something to do with a little coffee, is that I am so excited about this topic because I know that it's going to make a huge impact and allow us to improve the quality of life for so many of our non-human friends. So, Dr. Dodds, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Dodds, tell us what is nutrigenomics? I have it in writing that it is. What do we have here? We have the emerging science that studies a molecular reaction between nutrition and the response of genes in promoting health. So, how would myself and/or a layperson, what does that mean, Dr. Dodds?
Well, it's a very interesting question. You know, the term was only coined relatively recently in the early 2000s, along with the term pharmacogenomics, which was the same thing. You know, how certain individuals' genetics don't allow them to metabolize drugs or they get adverse reactions. It's the same thing. But the concept was developed in about 5 years before that, at the late 1990s, by someone like myself, who started to realize that in addition to all the diagnostic things we think about in terms of clinical medicine, that food was a very important modifier of how the body behaves and the body thrives or doesn't thrive. And so it became the term nutrigenomics, which is everywhere in the literature now. When you go on any of your search engines, you'll see foods, we are what we eat, about nutrigenomics. It's become very popular. It's almost like being gluten-free. It's a glom-on kind of thing to talk about these days. So basically what it is our genes are set for life. Our genetic profile is what we were born with. Basically, those genes only account for about 2% of our genome, and our genome is our entire body's blueprint, for example. So years ago, we used to teach that genes were part of our genome, but the rest of it was genetic junk. Now, can you believe how arrogant we were to think that God would create something in living beings, humans and other animals, that was junk, the majority of junk? Well, we turn out not so. The 98% are the things that regulate what the genes do. So the genes are the blueprint, they're our DNA, but they don't do anything until they get a message. And the messages they get are from the rest of the genome. And that's called epigenetics.
All right. Now, you couldn't be more right. I mean, how arrogant are we to think that only 2%, the only 2% that we figured out is the only 2% that's important, and that our creator, whatever you believe in, would have the 98% just be garbage. That's just really silly. So you guys and everyone that does work such as you have thought about, discovered, used the other 98%, or maybe he hasn't figured it out, but how is it that we are using that 98% to increase our quality of life?
Right. I just wanted to comment, when I said the word God, I was using that as a generic sense. Of course, I mean, however we were created is just fine. That's not wasn't the point. But the arrogance is ridiculous. I mean, yes. Obviously we were wrong. So the point is that the genes are the blueprint. The epigenome is controlled by environmental changes. The genes are not. And those environmental changes can be pollution, they can be depleting the ozone layer, they can be chemicals and toxins and all kinds of other bad things we want. But they can be foods and supplements and things that nourish the body. So the critical thing for all of us is, how do we do things that will make our epigenome have a positive effect on the genes? In other words, healthy change in our genetic expression versus bad things we don't want to do, which would downregulate the healthy genes and improve the unhealthy genes, and therefore create chronic disease and malaise and illness and fatigue, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the challenge. We need to promote things that will cause healthy expression of genes.
All right. So that being said, we have our genes, which are 2%. We have 98% of our genome and our epigenetics, and we're trying to influence that 98% by using foods and supplements. I'm going to go out on a limb and say whole food supplements, hopefully, that will improve the positive of our health and maybe downregulate the things that might be bad for us, chronic inflammation, God forbid, cancer, and those types of things. How do we know? Is there a standard menu of things that are good for everybody that should be helpful and upregulate the good? Or is it a person-to-person, dog-to-dog, cat-to-cat thing? And how do we know?
Okay, that's a very good question. First thing I wanted to remind everybody that food benefit for our body is an individual thing. So when you buy commercial pet food, for example, it may not do the same thing for one animal that it would do to another. And so we do it because of human convenience. It's easy for us not to have to make individual diets. So we have to be careful about that. Not all animals respond the same way. Some animals thrive on raw food. Some animals can't tolerate it. It's not because there's anything wrong with the raw food. It's the individual body that's trying to do it. Now, one of the things that we also have to remember, Carolyn, is that dogs are not obligate carnivores anymore.
No, they're not.
Cats are, more so than dogs. But we have made, over centuries of evolution, of the domesticated dogs being with humans, even in the caveman era. The dog has learned to digest starch, and it does that because there are 3 different genes that have changed, that are present in the dog that weren't present in the wolf. And that's some recent work, and about 2 years ago, that actually demonstrated what those genes were. Not only do they help us dogs today digest starch, they improve reproductive fertility, and they also help brain health and longevity. So we've evolved the dog to be better adaptable to our current conditions. Okay, so how do we know what are good things and bad things for the body?
Right.
You know, you read everywhere now, superfoods, functional foods. It's true. So you need functional, well, first of all, you need nutrient-dense foods, whole foods, okay, and those that are easily assimilated by the body. So you need functional carbohydrates, you need functional proteins, you need functional fats. And then you vary them with each individual depending upon the age and the breed and what else is going on with the health of the animal.
Can you define for me what a functional food is?
Yes.
Functional carb or functional protein. I mean, one word.
Yes, whether it be a carbohydrate, a protein, or a fat, is something that changes our genomic expression in a positive way.
Okay.
It has a positive functional effect. Now, carbohydrates are not essential for life, but we use them because they give us energy. There's so many good things. We do not want to feed carbohydrates that have a high glycemic index.
Correct. Yes.
Processed white sugar. Yes. Yuck. Right. You know, right. I mean, things that we know have been overly processed. What we need are functional fruits, functional vegetables, berries, for example, functional oils, and often we use plant-based oils rather than fish oils if the individual animal can't tolerate fish, for example. So legumes, vegetables, all functional vegetables, all functional fruits, apples, watermelon, blueberries, cranberries, pomegranate, etc. Now, protein is essential for life.
Yes.
So you have to have protein, and the protein, of course, should be biodigestible and bioavailable. Most proteins that are put in processed foods for ourselves and animals are not as readily bioavailable as we'd like, about 50% bioavailability on average. So an animal, for example, if you buy a food that lists 24% protein, the animal's probably only getting 12. So 12 may be fine for maintenance, but if that's a high activity performance lactating female, for example, that's not enough protein. So we need to, of course, balance that with carbohydrates and fat if she's pregnant or lactating or whatever. So they need to be non-GMO.
Thank you.
Gluten-free. And readily digestible and bioavailable. Now, we put corn in nearly every lower end and some higher end commercial pet foods. because it's high energy source of protein, readily available, not so expensive. But it's not, especially if it's GMO, not the kind of way that we want to derive the protein for an optimal health.
Okay. All right. You know what? You've said so many important things in such a short period of time. Now, when you're mentioning the fruits and the vegetables and the functionality of those things, it's so wonderful because they're hopefully as close to the earth as possible. Hopefully they're GMO free or organic, meaning that they're not sprayed with chemicals and those types of things, pesticides, fertilizers, and everything that goes with that. But the colors of the rainbow and phytonutrient does so much for our body. And I'm thinking, in my head, I'm thinking cancer because I do a lot of cancer stuff here, unfortunately. But the bioavailability of protein, you said something so important that even on a label of a food, it says one number, and then for our thought processes and how much is bioavailable actually being used is half of that. My gosh. And then you made mention in a past conversation about how foods change when we cook them. Let's say that we're cooking a protein at home for our creature. When raw bioavailability versus cooked bioavailability, is that different in the way that we had said when, or you had said, when a protein is cooked, the way our bodies react to it in an allergen type way is different than not cooked? I don't know. Is that the protein being denatured? I don't know. I mean, how do we do that?
Unfolding, Carolyn. The protein structure is unfolding and revealing hidden antigen proteins, subproteins or peptides within the protein itself.
Okay.
Now, just to enhance that, the colors are very important. Phytonutrients, plant nutrients, are very, very important. And the most common one we all know about are carotenoids, the orange color in carrots and other yellow vegetables, for example, or peppers, you know, red and yellow peppers, etc.
Yeah.
Now, we need to not forget functional fats, and functional fats are often oils, right? A source of omega-3. The dog needs omega-3 much more than omega-6 tends to be pro-inflammatory for the dog, so we want more omega-3 than omega-6 in our oils. And we don't want omega-9 necessarily because dogs can't use it. So it can be sitting there as a sort of neutral thing. And there's so many exciting plant oils these days. And I may have mentioned earlier that on our previous talk that Moringa oil is the new oil. Moringa. And so there's lots of oils that we want to do. And if you can't use shellfish, you know, because the animal doesn't tolerate shellfish, we can use krill oil, which is that ancient crustacean that's not related. Then you have borage oil and olive oil. Don't forget olive oil. We have evening primrose oil. We have hemp oil. We have, you know, oils and oils and oils.
Now, Dr. Dodds, is Moringa a plant?
Yes, Moringa is a plant oil. It's an ancient East Indian, East Asian grain. It's been around for centuries. It's extremely nutritious, as well as beneficial in terms of its availability for omega-3. So
nice.
functional foods are just amazing. I mean, berries, berries, berries. Please be sure that our dogs eat. You know, you'll see so many foods today that have blueberries in it, for example, cranberry, pomegranates. And then we have the spices, like turmeric, curcumin. And think of the other good sources of proteins, mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, for example.
Yes. I love mushrooms. I mean, I really love mushrooms, not only for the protein pieces of it, but also with regard to the superfoods and like I said, I do, I guess, too much cancer stuff, but all of those wonderful benefits that our 3 power mushrooms have, and the fact that a mushroom grows almost opposite of everything else, that the nutrients that it uses is from decay rather than life. And it's such an interesting topic, but the protein that you get from it, I think that some people that I know are still afraid that a mushroom is going to add to fungal infections in their creature. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. I mean, the thing is, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's like, where did you hear that? But
when we were in Peru at the end of last year, not this past year, the year before, visiting, we went to a vegetarian restaurant. We had an amazing soup called soy milk soup, which has some spring onions and shiitake mushrooms, fresh ginger, and organic unsweetened soy milk. It is so good and delicious, you know. Anyway, just let me just tell you one other thing about functional carbohydrates.
Yes, please.
Cruciferous vegetables are considered functional carbohydrates, but you
But
have to be very careful feeding them to an animal with a thyroid problem.
yes.
Because cruciferous vegetables, and there's a whole list, it's not just cauliflower, you know, you can go on and on and on with cruciferous vegetables. They inhibit thyroid function. However, if they're cooked as opposed to fed, chopped, and raw, you're going to reduce the amount of goitrogens. Goitrogens are foods that promote damage to the thyroid gland or thyroid gland activity. So cruciferous vegetable goitrogenic activity is reduced by cooking.
So if we have patients that want, or clients that want to feed cruciferous veg, whether it's our broccoli or cauliflower or kales or those types of things,
Brussels
sprouts, exactly right. If we cut them up and cook them, cooking them,
not mushy, just lightly steamed or whatever. Now, the opposite thing occurs when you take something and you cook it and you make it more goitrogenic, and that's millet. Many pet foods today have millet in them, and millet is also a very ancient grain, and it is a goitrogen.
Shoot.
In contrast to cruciferous vegetables, when you cook millet, but you can't eat it raw really, you increase the goitrogenic effect significantly. So we don't want to use millet for animals that have a thyroid dysfunction, or from a breed at high risk for it, or have immediate relatives that have it. My advice would be to avoid millet.
So that being said, what are some examples of breeds that have a high possibility, predilection, however it is we're going to talk about it, for thyroid issues? And then when we talk about our millet foods, I have to be honest with you, my office has got quite a few foods here that are sardine and millet and other things in millet, replacing highly processed foods with our ancient grains. So that's such incredibly good information now. But so what are our...
You're going to use quinoa instead.
All right,
1,000%. Quinoa is excellent.
So what are some of our breeds we have to be thoughtful about with regard to watching for thyroid?
Well, really, the only one that you have to worry about in terms of a grain is going to be millet. Soy to some extent, but mostly millet. It's much more so that you have goitrogenic vegetables, like the cruciferous vegetables. Again, if we cook them, maybe it doesn't have a huge effect.
Okay. Now, a couple minutes ago, you had mentioned about our functional oils and how many of them are plant-based at this point in time, and that's great because I got to be honest, that's about all we eat in our life is a plant-based oil for whatever purposes. Now, the plant-based oils do not have cholesterol in them because they're not a flesh-based oil.
Right.
What are the thoughts about cholesterol with these guys? And to be honest with you, I just finished with a client who had a little bit of elevation in cholesterol, and it just completely freaked the owner out. And I'm like, actually, one point in our situation here, I'm not super worried about that at the moment, but we'll get to it. So when we think about doing non-cholesterol oils, our creatures do need cholesterol. Yes, this is coming from a human side where we're so freaked out about cholesterol on the human medicine side. It doesn't need to be that way.
Yes, yeah, it is definitely not like that in animals, and most people extrapolate from the human situation, and even my dear husband is a freak about cholesterol, even though it's not high. You know, he's still worried, and even though his blood pressure is so low they can't measure it, he's still worried. So whatever, you know. So they said, oh, well, just drink apple juice, drink fresh apple juice, you know, 10 ounces a day, and lower your cholesterol from normal to lower than that. And of course, you gain I don't know how many calories and 20 pounds in no time.
Yes.
You know, so don't worry about it. High levels of cholesterol in the dog will occur, for example, in two situations. When there's a really severe liver failure, when the body can't metabolize normally, and so cholesterol accumulates. And in the very end stages of thyroid dysfunction, when the thyroid is completely gone. It's not the standard situation we see. And a little bit of elevated cholesterol in most of our situations means absolutely nothing clinically, and especially if the animal's on a raw diet. Remember, the raw diet may be really have good functional fats in it, and the cholesterol may be a smidge up. We ignore it.
Yeah. It's hard. It's difficult sometimes to make that statement to a client when they are having human medicine concerns. I'm like, I'm actually not that worried about that one point where, you know, it's the whole creature is what I'm more concerned about, and the thyroid looks really good, so we'll relax about that for now. I think the story about your husband cracks me up. Now, with regard to all of this information that you're giving us. You have recently published a book on this topic, yes?
Correct.
Yeah, so Canine Nutrigenomics, a new science of feeding your dog for optimal health. Can you please let us know, first of all, how to get it and what is included in, I think, the 323 wonderful pages of your book? And I think you had a friend or somebody else, another professional, helping you with this book that you told me a nice story about the other day.
Yes, this book is written by myself and my good friend Diana Laverdura, who's a professional pet nutritionist now. Her website is petdiva.com, and she does nutritional consulting. She's just finished her master's degree in special metabolism, actually, of foods. And Diana and I wrote a book together in 2011, and this is our second book. Just came out in the middle of January. It's, I think, the #1 dog food cookbook on Amazon right now.
Yes,
I think it's the #9 dog book of all time, and it's only been out like 3 weeks. So,
yes.
But of course those rankings change, and whatever. So it's published by Dogwise in Wenatchee, Washington. You can order it there. You can order it through Amazon, and I think it is back ordered until February. You can get a Kindle version, which many people in overseas are reading already. And it's just been amazing. We're just totally floored by the response to this book. I mean, our thyroid book has 53 5-gold stars, but this book is, I think, more amazing. Not because we wrote it. It took us more than 2 years to finish it, but because it's been written for the public. It's easy to understand, and you can take it in sections. And it's not a recipe book. There's one basil recipe. That's all. Just as a general idea. But it's telling people how foods work so that you, for yourself or your companion animal, can decide how to prepare the healthiest meals for him or her.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And so myself and everybody else can purchase this book via Kindle or Amazon or those types of things. And it is, as you said, in sections, so it's not this overwhelming avalanche of information that sometimes can get overwhelming. I guess a little frustrating sometimes, but that's not the case here, correct?
Yeah, we talk about some of the more common health conditions towards the end of the book, to have people emphasize how they tweak the basic diet if the animal's got cardiac disease or kidney disease or liver disease or whatever. And then the book has little bones drawn in it, which are digging deeper, which means if you want to know more of the actual science and the references, which are current, you go to the back of the book and you read more stuff on digging deeper, and you see all the references for each chapter. So everything that we're stating is refereed in the scientific literature.
Wow, that's so great, because that broadens the appeal, doesn't it? I mean, it's not just our pet owners, it's folks like myself. They're going to be reading it like, oh, where did she get that information, or where's the resource that goes along with that, so I can go and spend all my evening with 3 or 4 books on my bed rather than just one. So now,
well, there's quite a few books like that, so you have to be sure that they've been written with a scientific backup. That's important.
Exactly. Now that brings up another point. Now I teach quite a few classes, and I do a lot of education in my office, and then of course trying to get the word out like this with your help. I can't say strongly enough my opinion about find out whose information this is, who's backing this up, who's actually saying this, where's their science, where's their education, where are their credentials. And I'm very, very quite serious about it, because as we said quite a few times, that the things you get on the internet, Dr. Wikipedia and Dr. Google don't have veterinary medical licenses, so we have to know who we're getting the information from. So a source like this book, coming from yourself, with all of these scientific references in the back with digging deeper, it must be such a wonderful resource for everybody that's interested. And then what are your thoughts about advising for underlying medical problems? Because I find that some people want to kind of bypass going to the vet by reading the internet or reading a book. Do you address medical issues that might underlie some of their issues that they're seeing at home?
We don't want pet guardians making their own diagnoses. We make it absolutely clear they have to work with their veterinarian, they have to go to their veterinarian, they have to get the appropriate examinations and lab work and even maybe more sophisticated diagnoses. And once all of the diagnoses are made, if the animal's healthy, then the veterinarian can help them, direct them to what could be the best food. And it may not be the ones that they carry or they recommend. It can be whatever. I have a client in England right now who did some testing through hemopats, through a holistic veterinarian that we work with there. But she went to a regular veterinarian because the dog is 15 and has some chronic health things, maybe some adrenal Cushing's disease. Anyway, she went there, and the first thing the regular veterinarian says, well, I need to look at everything. What are you feeding the dog? And she said raw. And the guy went ballistic, totally ballistic. He says, don't you know that the dog can get Campylobacter, or, I mean, he couldn't even spell it, sorry, for eating raw food. And the poor lady was so upset because, you know, she's very experienced. She knows what she's feeding. I said, just thank the person. Don't make them, don't get into an argument. Thank them very much and just continue what you're feeding and get the rest of the diagnostic workup that needs to be done. We'll go from there.
Yeah, that's fantastic because that's such a funny story because that happens quite often with what I do is that when you go to get bigger diagnostics or you have an emergency or that you're going to do those types of things, what do you feed your dog? It's written on a line, and sometimes the response to that is not fun.
People don't know that commercial dry kibble has more salmonella contamination if you culture it than it would a fresh raw food. And obviously, if we're feeding spoiled human food to pets because we think it's better, that's ridiculous. You have to feed human grade, fresh, safe foods. And you certainly aren't going to put raw meat on a wood chopping block with a suckling infant in your arms, or God forbid an elderly person that's on chemotherapy. You're going to be very careful about scrubbing everything and keeping it clean. It's common sense hygiene that's got nothing to do with the food.
I often, when I'm in class, when we're talking about raw, and there's some folks that are worried about the salmonella thing, and some of the I've never heard a client say Campylobacter, but I've tested for it 100 times. I said, when you cook chicken, do you actually sanitize your countertop before moving on to vegetable? And people look at me like, what? And I start laughing. I said, well, this makes you at a higher risk than feeding your dog raw. It's an interesting corollary, I guess. People are like, what do you mean? I should, and I'm like, okay. You know, the chicken thing, like the raw chicken thing, is a human concern with the baby in your arm or depending on immune suppressed in your family. It seems like a completely foreign topic, but you say raw food, and oh my gosh. So
they can just freeze the, get the fresh human meat or whatever, and put it into portions and dump it in grapeseed or grapefruit seed extract. Dump it in portions in the freezer, and then bring it out. I mean, this person in the UK didn't even mention salmonella. He was only concerned about campy, and he couldn't spell it. Campylobacter.
Isn't that odd? I wonder if that's a
No.
That's weird, isn't it? I'm like, because here I think the media plays into it as well, and that's really here.
Sadly, it's not this person's fault entirely. They are not taught this properly. The only thing they probably hear from is the commercial pet food detail reps that come to the clinic. They don't get it in continuing education. And I know I'm making an excuse for my profession, but there's such an educational void, Carolyn. It's so sad.
I have people ask me about my experience in nutrition in vet school. I tell them it's 3 hours, and they serve pizza, so I went. And then I drank my coffee, and as hurry, trying to keep my brain working, drinking my coffee, eating free pizza, attending my 3 hours of nutrition in 4.5 years of veterinary school, including all the postdoctorate stuff. So, and then I said I had to take it upon myself to self-educate. I had to self-educate, and here I am kind of, regurgitating this to you. I said, but as always, I believe what I say. It just changes. So we all have to be very, very cognizant of continuing to be, up to speed. So you have a wonderful, what is it, a blog or on your internet connections where it's Dr. Jean Dodds Pet Health Resource Blog, yes? Right. And there's a nice section here, reducing inflammation, improving detoxification, and promoting repair. Now, on that section on your blog, there you make reference to quite a few food products that have a lot of power, yes?
Right, correct. That particular blog was actually published in Animal Wellness magazine, and it was written with myself and my young holistic colleague, Dr. Adam Lassen, who is
Yes.
now, as of this week, working full-time with Hemopet in our new Hemopet Holistic Care Center. This is
Nice.
not a clinic now where we do surgery and stuff. This is a clinic devoted to holistic, alternative diagnostics and acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine, etc.
Huh.
And so Adam has joined us, and we're very, very excited about that. He's been helping us part-time for about 2 years. Finally, I said, this is ridiculous. Let's just hire him so that, because we're so busy and we can do more together. But anyway, there's lots of foods like, for example, do people know about green-lipped mussel? Do they know about that as a supplement, which is so good?
No, they don't. No, they don't.
Why is it called green-lipped mussel? Because the mussel has a green lip. So that would be just one. And then the benefits of honey, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Raw honey, Manuka honey preferably. But remember, raw honey should not be given to very young animals. Like you don't give it to babies either, because it's dangerous. So you would wait for raw honey until they're older.
I recommend Manuka honey for wound healing, external wound healing on a very superficial, not an excuse not to go seek medical help, but the power of sugar and the power of Manuka honey cannot be denied as far as I'm concerned. Now you're talking about internal ingestion of Manuka for
but on the surface as well. Now what we do actually, the first thing we do is we use a tea poultice or a tea rinse. Green tea for a light-colored animal and black tea for not plain. People have forgotten about tea. My God, it's an oriental remedy it's a powerful antioxidant. It's antimicrobial. So clean things out, superficial wounds and skin irritations with tea, and then you can help it heal with the honey, like you said.
I can't. I'm so proud of myself right now. I can't even tell you, because I recommend green tea for, I'm going to say, 99% of my patients, and we have a discussion about the power and the medicinal benefits of it. And even if it's just a little bit of weight loss, but the antibacterial, the antiviral, the antifungal, the topical, the spray for itch, and I said, make a cup of tea, share it with your creature, take the tea leaves out of the bag and put it in their food and moisten it. I mean, just the power of green tea. Not that it can't do any harm, I guess, if you overused it, but the simple medicinal in wonderment of green tea in and of itself, and people don't know. I mean, they just don't know. So
look at the premium pet foods today. They've all got green tea in them for the tannins and polyphenols. They're adding green tea, getting rid of the rosemary and the oregano. It's toxins. Some of them have both, but we're starting to get the pet food industry to understand that rosemary extract's not good for animals that are prone to seizures.
Now, can you explain that to our folks that are like,
Rosemary extract, and to a lesser extent oregano, although oregano oil is a potent, they're neurotoxins, meaning they're toxic for the brain, and for certain animals they'll definitely cause seizures. We had an 8-year-old Weimaraner from San Diego that started to have small petit mal seizures, little clenching episodes, 2 or 3 a month. And they couldn't understand because, the animal was fine, went through everything, including an MRI, and was healthy. It turned out they would change the food, and the food had rosemary in it. As soon as she stopped feeding that food and got a rosemary extract-free premium pet food, the seizure stopped.
So how powerful is that? Hippocrates did know his stuff, didn't he? Holy smokes! Now on your on your blog, there is something that I'm curious about. If you don't mind discussing it for a couple of moments. One of them is royal jelly, which I always have problems with, and the other one, which I don't know enough about, is the velvet, the deer and elk velvet.
So deer and elk antler velvet powder. It can be deer or elk. It's very, very potent, the covering of the antlers. Now, part of the problem is we talk about it in our book, but we're not promoting raising venison, for example, for meat, although more and more pet foods have that, and they farm-raise venison in Australia and New Zealand. I've seen them. They look like sheep, and they don't go anywhere. They're in these huge pastures with white picket fence, whatever. So it's not that. But of course, they do shed the velvet, and so you can get the velvet and extract it. It's very good and it's excellent, and there's some really good ones. Most of the best ones come from New Zealand, or they may be packaged in the United States, but it would say deer or elk velvet from New Zealand. Now, if you have a food intolerance to venison, you can't use deer or elk velvet. It's not a good idea. So that's good. And then royal jelly is part of the bee family with propolis. And so you have to be very careful, though, with bees, that when you start the bee extract products, which are very good, you have to start with a very small amount, because individuals, like even children, can be very sensitive to it. A tiny, tiny amount, you know, like a grain, just a little tiny grain. Yeah. And if they tolerate it well, then you can increase it to whatever the amount is to get the desired effect.
Yeah, and that sometimes when we talk about things like this, I'm concerned that people will run out, get these things, and as you said, too much, too fast, because so-and-so said it's the right thing to do, or because I read about it here. In your book, do you give recommendations about how to move that into the life of your pet?
Yes, we do. You know, for people that are starting out, Carolyn, I would not go to the bee products. I think it's dangerous. You need to do something much more easily acclimated. You know, the animal's more acclimated to it. You just need to do the oils, need to do turmeric, simple things, and do the berries. You know, use the antioxidant berries. Feed the things that we talked about as supplements that are going to be very safe. Not strawberries, though. Remember, even though animals love strawberries,
they do,
and whatever, and they can eat the whole strawberry, including the little plant top. There are animals, dogs, that do not tolerate strawberries well, and there are people that don't. So we don't recommend strawberries as a fruit. But watermelon's good, and apples, you know, pears, peaches, whatever.
Right.
And berries, and don't forget pomegranates.
Pomegranates have an extremely high antioxidant load, or that's why we love it, right?
Excellent. And you can buy pomegranate oil. You can buy pomegranate, you know, whatever. Pomegranate, you can get all vegan pomegranate granola bars and stuff now that are with blueberries and pomegranates and stuff in them that are very healthy.
Now, my next question is about glandulars. Now, when I do work for, like, once again, broken record, a lot of cancer work, doing glandulars. Now, there is always some confusion about glandulars. Is it really the gland of one creature I'm feeding to another creature to get that gland to feel better, or is it, what exactly is a glandular, and how is it that can be beneficial to the corresponding organ or the immune system and such? Because the companies that I use, we do have 3 or 4 different glandulars that we use, and I know that it's on your blog. So how do we tell folks what a glandular is and how that's going to benefit my friend?
Well, and actually we talk about glandulars, but frankly I'll have to tell you I rarely use them. One of the problems is the glandulars have to come from an animal. And so if you have an animal that's got a milk reactivity or a beef reactivity, you don't want bovine glandulars, right? And then the question is, we have very good companies that make excellent glandulars, but they can make adrenal and kidney and liver and pituitary and thyroid and whatever. And the thing is, some people say, oh, I'll just buy one of each. And so you do polyglandular. You buy 5 or 6 glandulars and you dump them all in and you think it'll balance the body. Well, most thyroid glandulars will only support the thyroid gland. They cannot replace thyroid hormone. They don't have active hormone in them. Regardless of what they tell you, they've extracted it. It's not working. So, you know, if you're going to use glandulars, it's sort of like yogurt. Would you use sheep or goat source rather than cow's milk?
Yeah.
Those are the issues. And frankly, thyroid glandulars for me are only for support. So if the thyroid gland is sluggish, but is basically still working, and the animal's older, I might use a thyroid glandular support to help it work more efficiently. But it's not replacing something that the animal can't make.
Right. No, yeah, it's thank you for that. I really appreciate that, because describing it and its use, and that not its overuse and not its use as a replacement for proper treatment and proper diagnostics, right?
Exactly.
Now, we've gone over a lot of things and kind of strayed away from the reason that we're kind of having this conversation. Nutrigenomics, and then when we talked about the epigenomics and these kind of umbrella terminology, we are using food to enhance the overall health and life of our doggies and our other friends by, is this a manipulation or a modulation of the way the body and the genome was going to work, or has it just been waiting for proper nutrition to behave in a certain way? Or are we turning on and off triggers that are on the genome, or, I mean, on a more kind of molecular level? How is this actually working? Do you
You're
mind
doing
talking
all
about
of
that?
those. You're doing all of those things. You're reducing the expression of inflammatory mediators or modulators, inflammatory reactions. You're increasing the expression of beneficial modifiers at the tissue level, and you're also providing better nutrition. So, for example, you can take animals, as the work we've done with Professor Bruno Stefanon, which is discussed in our book, from Italy, and he's been a friend for 25 years, he and his family. And Dr. Stefanon actually developed a system for looking at DNA RNA microarray, which is a molecular system commonly used in medicine now to show how enzymes are turned on or turned off. Like, one of the inflammatory enzyme systems that is good and bad is the cytochrome system, which functions mostly in the liver. Cytochromes are turned on, they're pro-inflammatory, like interleukins are another enzyme family that are pro-inflammatory. When cytochrome enzymes work efficiently, like cytochrome P450, it's a detoxifying enzyme in the liver. So what Dr. Stefanon showed is in dogs with severe end-stage liver disease, and in sheep with severe, and dogs with severe arthritis, that he could add a herb that had functional epigenetic expression properties for 28 days and completely cleanse the enzyme inflammation, completely detoxify the inflammatory cytokines. So you could show them on a DNA RNA microarray, all red, all 20 or 30 of them red, turned on. 28 days later, they're green, they're turned off, and the animal is cured. And as I said to my dear friend, the sheep couldn't walk. You cleanse them with Andrographis paniculata and curcumin, turmeric, for 28 days together, king of bitters and turmeric, and now they can walk, and you're going to kill them, so we eat them, huh? We're vegetarians, and he's not. So he said, oh, gee. But in the liver, we use silymarin, milk thistle.
We do.
That's all we use. Silybum marianum, and we used it for 28 days, and it took the severe liver disease dogs and completely cleansed them. 28 days is all you need.
Are you doing? We need to talk about this later. Now, you mentioned cytochrome P450. Now, it's my understanding that cats are deficient in cytochrome P450. Am I correct with that? Because our cats don't process medications through the liver. Our liver's so sensitive in our kitty cats. Is that a cytochrome P450 deficiency or lack thereof, or is it something that you're talking about from your friend's research that could be helpful for cats in general with that sensitivity in their liver?
No, not really. Cytochrome P450 is a critical enzyme system in all animals, but it's more functional in some species than others, and it's less functional in cats. So it's more difficult for them to detoxify things.
Okay, all right, that's great. And then with the milk thistle, the silymarin is really, for me, it's the key.
Amazing, yeah, amazing. And we have to remind our audience that when they buy milk thistle, or it's prescribed by a veterinarian or whatever, that only 80% of it is the active ingredient. All silymarin is 80% milk thistle. You can't make it more concentrated than that. So if you're buying a product that, say, has 200 milligrams per mil, only 80% of that is actually the active ingredient. So you have to take a little bit, change your volume a little bit to account for the 20% that's not active.
Now, if we have clients, interested parties, of course, in your book, and of course all the work that you do with Hemopat and all of its wonders, all the magic that you guys do, is it a slow transition? Is this a one thing at a time that we change? Is this a consultation with I have people that want to do too much too fast to fix them so quickly, and I'm one of them. I'm sorry, but do we do slow change and add one of these wonderful beneficial foods at a time, or let's talk about NutriScan? Is that something that we want to think about doing so we're not adding to a problem, adding to a intolerance possibly as we're looking at these wonderful foods?
Yeah, it's not so easy to make a comment for each individual because it depends how long they've been eating it. For example, we have a client with a small dachshund who did a NutriScan because he was licking and chewing his paws all the time. They knew he couldn't tolerate chicken because that made it worse. So he did NutriScan, and it showed what he should eat, primarily lamb, and he could drink some soy milk. But most of everything else was no good. He also shouldn't have turkey. It was reactive, not extremely reactive. So she started gradually. She was feeding turkey and green beans. She switched the turkey to lamb and green beans, and he started licking.
Oh, why?
Grass-fed lamb. And I got the email this morning. So she said, what do I do? He was fine on turkey, even though he reacts to it. I said, go back to turkey. We'll start again, and we'll add something else, and we'll do it more slowly. So you don't want to go, quotes, cold turkey. That's a pun, but... you want to introduce the thing slowly, but if there's something that's really strongly inflammatory, if it's strong on NutriScan, we need to get rid of that right away.
Okay, now
so not use it.
So for folks that haven't seen our other YouTube together, can you just briefly go over what NutriScan is for this session on our Nutrigenomics?
Yeah. NutriScan is the only salivary-based test for food intolerance and sensitivity in the dog and the cat. And we're about to start the clinical trials shortly on the horse.
Right.
It's patented all over the world, and it's unique in that we're looking for how the body sees foods that it doesn't tolerate normally. And the reaction occurs at the surface of the bowel and expressed in the saliva or the feces. We chose not to use feces as our sampling material, so we use saliva. And we've done over 7,000 dogs and nearly 300 cats since we started recently. And it's amazing. It's a totally amazing test. My colleague, holistic colleague who does consultations, laboratory diagnostic consultations for us, was a skeptic about, he's your classical skeptic, okay? He has a Doberman that was having GI problems, so he did NutriScan and he changed the food. He said, my God, it works, it's wonderful. So we thought, hey, this is my own colleague who was skeptical, which is fine, but he tried it on his own dog and now he's happy.
You know what? That's so funny you mentioned that because I have many naysayers, skeptics as clients who are absolute true believers now. I mean, like, carry your stuff around everywhere saying, how come you don't know about that? How come you haven't done this? And how come I've never heard about this? You guys should do this. They're like in the dog park. I'm not kidding you. They just hand out your stuff like, this thing saved my dog's life. I mean, you should just know about this. They don't know the science of it. They're just like, whatever that was, just do that. So I love that. And then if you have, if you're trying to work with the Nutrigenomics thought processes, getting the sources of inflammation, the sources of discomfort, the sources of disharmony out of their diet, whether you be using NutriScan or not, I think would be a wonderful fundamental, someplace to start, yes?
Right. And if the pet owner says, well, every time I feed my animal X, it licks and scratches and whatever, so duh, don't feed X. You know? I mean, common sense would tell you that regardless, right?
I'm actually not a believer in common sense. I just am not a believer in common sense because I don't see it very often. So that's my bad. So prior to closing, when we have this viewing audience and we talk about your book and we talk about Nutrigenomics and we talk about NutriScan, I can't overstate the power of food. And do you have when you teach everywhere around the world, how is it that you start these conversations with folks? Are they traditional veterinarians? Are they consumers? Are they pet owners? Who are these people? And how do you start this conversation with folks that may not even know about the power of food?
My audiences are all kinds of people, all kinds of groups, and many kennel club sponsors, for example, now have veterinarians and veterinary technicians attending as well because they get continuing education credits when I'm teaching. So that's really good. So we tell them that the key to health, so an immune system and resistance to disease, is optimal nutrition. So fresh, wholesome foods are the key to a healthy immune system and resistance to disease. That's how I start. And the people are glued to their chairs. They are totally amazed that we can do so much for ourselves and our animals just by food, with food and the right supplements and whatever.
That's
Amazing.
awesome. Now, how this is going to be another temptation to go into a couple hours worth of conversation. But you mentioned before no GMOs, no genetic modification. Now, I think I've spent a lot of time with GMOs, and I have very, very strong opinions about it. Would you mind discussing that in what is your definition, and what do you think it's doing with the health of our food supply? Let's just make it that, I guess, because
Well,
it's
I think
important.
the current controversy about eggs and what kind of eggs are safest for us, which is readily available on the internet these days, illustrate that. They're
Yes.
basically saying that you can have free-range chickens, you can have cage-free chickens, you can have non-genetically modified grains that those or other foods that those chickens are fed. But the best way in America to be sure you're getting correct organic, happy chickens that are laying fresh eggs is if it's USDA certified and approved.
The organic food?
Yes, eggs.
Okay.
USDA eggs. And it says non-GMO. We just went and did our grocery shopping before we started our program this morning. And there's so many different eggs. This is cage-free. This is California certified. This is that. This is that. There's at least a dozen different, range-free, cage-free, white eggs, brown eggs, small eggs, medium size, jumbo, comumbo. And then you look at it and you can't. But then you find the organic, non-GMO, cage-free, USDA-approved egg. That's what you get because the USDA has certified. They've actually gone there. I mean, cage-free, how big is the cage? How big is the free? What is it?
Nothing. Yeah. And that, like I said, that's how this thing can launch off into a very long discussion. But that it's my belief that the genetic modification process in and of itself does allow for reactivity in our bodies, as not recognizing that as even something that belongs on this planet. As also, what did the chicken that you are feeding your dog eat? It's not that the creature is genetically modified. It's what did it eat? Because what did your food eat? And it's a different discussion. But
the residues are in the meat. Exactly. You're eating the meat residues that the animal ate. So if you're feeding beef that were fed corn silage, and your animal can't have corn, you've got corn in the meat.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Residues.
So those are sometimes folks don't think that way. So they just think, oh, look, it's just beef and they're not allergic to it. I said, what did that cow eat? Whether it's genetic modification or is it a corn and soy cow that was at a slaughterhouse versus a free range, is it a grass So we need to, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, that we need to ask our folks to think outside the box. It's outside of just the chicken. What the heck did the chicken eat? Or how is that corn raised? Or whatever it is. So it's a bigger thing. Do you guys get into that one step back thought processes in the book with regard to paying attention to what okay, yes. Cool because that's quite important, isn't it? So Dr. Dodds, can you please tell our audience, how do we get a hold of you? How do we contact you? How do we get on this awesome blog that you have with tons of wonderful information, and how do we get your book again?
Okay, our website is www.hemopet.org because we're a nonprofit. We also have www.nutriscan.org about Nutriscan. We have the blog, we're on our Facebook page and whatever. The book can be obtained from Dogwise Publishing or from Amazon.com. And we also run the Rabies Challenge Fund, which is the study with Dr. Schultz to extend the protection from rabies vaccines beyond 3 years. Yes. And that's www.rabieschallengefund.org.
Excellent. And then we can get a hold of you on all these websites. We can buy your book from Dogwise, and then it's also available, but you said kind of on back order at the Amazons of the world.
Yeah, everybody's ordering it, so you might as well just jump on if you want it. And also, we have a new website for emails at Hemopet. It's info@hemopet.org. So info@hemopet.org. We've just converted to a much larger, more user-friendly internet system that will allow us to receive emails more effectively.
All right, beautiful. Well, Dr. Dodds, I have no way of thanking you for all of this information. You know that I'll be sitting and reading and reading and reading after I go and see my horse and tell my horse that we can NutriScan the horse soon. It's coming soon.
Absolutely.
This is very exciting. I do appreciate your time and everything there is about you and how you're so dedicated to helping our non-human friends just to have a better life. And with this holistic pet care with Dr. O, you really are the essence of what it is that I'm trying to do. So I appreciate you very, very much. And have a wonderful day with your family, friends, your business, and your husband. And I will no doubt be bothering you again very soon.
Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Oh,
Take
you're very,
care.
very welcome. Take care, hon. Bye bye.